The Chicago sky hung heavy and gray, the air thick with the weight of an impending storm. I stood by the car, steadying my son Michael as he took each shaky step, his wooden crutch bearing the burden of his weight. The mournful toll of church bells from the nearby downtown square echoed in my chest, a grim prelude to the day ahead. In my hands, I clutched my old leather briefcase, its worn edges a testament to years of battles fought and survived. It wasn't just a briefcase. It held the honor of our family and the faint hope of our future. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Curious neighbors, reporters with flashing cameras, and whispers buzzing like a restless swarm. "It's the Villaseñor divorce," someone muttered. "They say it's brutal." Poor son. Each word sank into my heart, but I kept my face cold, unyielding, showing no crack of weakness. Then, a sleek luxury car screeched to a stop behind us. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, stepped out, her red Gucci dress screaming defiance, her dark sunglasses failing to hide the smug curl of her lips. Her parents and brother followed, chins high, striding as if victory was already theirs. My stomach churned at the sight. They didn't know the sleepless nights, the endless struggles Michael and I had endured to keep our family whole. I motioned for Michael to move forward, following silently as he leaned heavily on his crutches, his once strong frame hunched under the weight of his pain. Each step he took twisted a knife in my heart, but I gripped my briefcase tighter and walked with forced calm. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and unspoken tension. Jessica sat at the defendant's bench, legs crossed, her red heels tapping the floor in a mocking rhythm. When Michael struggled in, she sneered, leaning toward her mother just loud enough for all to hear. "Look at him, nothing but a crippled old man." My blood boiled, but I bit my lip, swallowing the rage. Michael lowered his head, his chest heaving as he settled into the plaintiff's chair, gripping his crutches like a lifeline. Seeing my son, my strong, loving boy, humiliated by the woman who'd vowed to love him, tore my heart apart. Jessica's lawyer, Jennifer Rivers, rose with a stack of papers, her voice dripping with arrogance. "We will demonstrate that Michael Villaseñor is no longer capable of fulfilling his duties as a husband and father." Each word struck like a hammer, but I stayed silent, waiting for my moment. The courtroom fell still as Judge Stephen Morales entered. His piercing eyes scanned the room, softening briefly with compassion as they landed on Michael. Then he saw me. His gaze froze, shock replacing his usual composure, as if he'd seen a ghost. I walked slowly to the defense table, the sharp thud of my briefcase on the wooden surface echoing like a declaration of war. I pulled out the chair and sat beside Michael, his trembling hand finding mine. The room was silent except for the faint scratch of the clerk's pen. Judge Morales leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you here?" The question hung in the air like a cold gust, sending a ripple of unease through the room. Jessica frowned, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Her parents exchanged panicked whispers, their confidence crumbling. Michael lifted his head, confusion in his eyes but a spark of hope flickering within them. My heart ached for him. He didn't know. No one in that room knew. I wasn't just a mother. Years ago, I was someone Chicago revered, someone whose name carried weight in every courtroom. The dense air of the courtroom pulled me back to the past. Years ago, under a golden sun, our small family knew peace. Our humble home rang with laughter. Michael, at 7, racing through the yard with a worn ball, singing the pop songs I taught him. My husband, David, would sit on the porch, smoking, watching his son with a quiet smile. But that peace was a fragile dream. One night, the scent of pot roast still lingering in the kitchen, David set down his fork, his gaze cold. "Linda," he said, voice flat, "I'm leaving. I have another life." I stood frozen, spoon in hand, as he grabbed a packed suitcase and walked out. Under the streetlight, I glimpsed a woman, a wealthy widow I later learned, who'd stolen the man I loved. The fading sound of the car engine left a silence that shattered my soul. That night, I found Michael huddled under his covers, sobbing. I held him, refusing to cry. I had to be his rock. "Mom, why did Dad leave?" he asked, voice breaking. "I don't know, son," I whispered, "but you and I will always be together." I kept that promise, though every night, alone in the kitchen, the pain of betrayal cut deeper. The years that followed were grueling. Mornings began early, making breakfast for Michael and biking him to school. By day, I toiled as an office clerk, eyes glued to the keyboard, hiding the exhaustion of sleepless nights. But I carried a secret, one that would resurface in that courtroom, ready to turn the tide. At night, while Michael pored over his homework, I sat hunched over the dining room table, balancing the ledgers of local shops. Rainy evenings often found us sharing a tattered umbrella, trudging through flooded streets to reach home. Soaked to the skin, my bones chilled, I'd still clasp Michael's hand and muster a smile. "We're tougher than this storm, right?" I'd say. His nod and bright grin were my only light in those shadowed times. I never shared the sleepless nights I spent worrying over tuition, rent, or medicine. Once, when Michael burned with fever, I scoured pharmacies with just a handful of coins. At the counter, I counted each one, my heart sinking as I weighed medicine against tomorrow's meal. But surrender wasn't an option. Michael was my reason to keep going. The day Michael's acceptance letter for electrical engineering arrived, I stood frozen in the kitchen, clutching the paper, tears streaming down my face. Tears of joy, a rarity after years of struggle. But joy quickly gave way to dread. College was a dream I could barely afford. Without a word, I retrieved my wedding ring, the last relic of a failed marriage, from its hiding place in an old wooden box. At the pawn shop, watching the owner appraise it felt like losing a piece of my soul. Michael caught me later, his eyes red. "Mom, you don't have to do this," he said. "I'll work. I cut him off, my hand on his shoulder. Study hard, do what I never could. His embrace told me he wasn't my little boy anymore. Michael didn't falter. Through years of grit, he built us a 2-story home on Chicago's outskirts. The day he handed me the keys, I stood before those walls and wept. "Mom, I promised," he said, voice thick with emotion. "This is ours. No one can take it away." I held him, feeling the sweat, tears, and love in every brick. For the first time in ages, I knew I'd done right by not giving up. When Michael married Jessica, I thought our family was whole. Jessica, with her orange blossom smile, seemed perfect. She'd join me in the kitchen, bubbling with plans for a big family with Michael. "Lots of grandkids for you," she'd laugh. I believed her. Michael's eyes glowed in her presence, and I thanked God for such a daughter-in-law. But tragedy struck like a thief. A midnight call, a trembling foreman's voice. "Mrs. Villison, Michael's had an accident. Come to the hospital." I ran barefoot through icy streets, my heart pounding. There, Michael lay still, swathed in bandages, fragile as a child again. "I'm here, Michael," I whispered, gripping his hand. "Mom's here." Months dragged on, each day a battle. Michael recovered slowly, but his legs were lost to crutches forever. The vibrant, talkative man became a quiet shadow, his eyes heavy with grief. Watching him shuffle across the yard, I felt my heart tear. Our home, once alive with laughter, turned silent as a grave. I converted the living room, meant for future grandchildren, into a downstairs bedroom for Michael's ease. Each glance at that simple bed broke me. Jessica played the devoted wife at first, bringing soup, administering medicine, offering smiles I wanted to trust. But her patience frayed fast. One morning, Michael's eyes sparked with rare hope. "Mom, I want to see the garden," he said. "Can you ask Jessica to help?" I found her in the kitchen, dressed to leave, coffee in hand. "Jessica, Michael wants to go outside. Can you help him?" Her frown was sharp, her tone colder. "I've got too much to do. Can't he manage alone?" She slammed her cup down and left. Back in the room, Michael's gaze was fixed on the floor, hands tight on his wheelchair. "Forget it, Mom," he murmured. I swallowed my rage, pushed him to the garden, and forced a smile to hide my breaking heart. Family dinners, once warm with chatter, grew tense. I cooked Michael's favorites, chili, homemade soup, hoping to spark joy. Jessica barely ate, setting her fork down with a muttered, "Not hungry." She'd once loved my stuffed peppers, vowing to learn the recipe. Now, she looked at Michael with barely veiled disdain, as if his presence was a burden. One night, passing the kitchen, I overheard her on the phone, her voice low and calculating. "Once we split the house, we'll have enough to start over." My heart stopped. The house, Michael's pride, our refuge, was just a means to her end. The house Michael had built with his own hands, pouring in years of sweat and dreams, stood as a testament to his resilience. He had handed me its key with a smile that radiated pride, the kind only a son could offer. But now, that same house was becoming a pawn in her scheme. My instinct was to storm through the door and confront Jessica, to lay bare her betrayal. Yet I restrained myself. I needed time. I needed evidence. Above all, I needed to shield Michael from this devastating truth for as long as I could. Jessica's transformation wasn't just internal. Her appearance had changed too. The modest dresses she once wore, soft and unassuming, were replaced by flashy, expensive outfits that clung to her frame and shimmered under the light. Her lipstick was a bold, defiant red, her perfume so overpowering I had to crack open the windows whenever she breezed through. She began leaving the house at night, tossing out flimsy excuses, a reunion with old friends, a need to unwind. I'd watch her go, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood, each step sinking my heart deeper. I remembered the days when she'd hold Michael's hand, her face glowing as they planned their future together. Now, every time she walked out, she wasn't just leaving the house. She was abandoning the promises that had once convinced me to trust her. Whispers from the neighbors started creeping in. One afternoon at the market, Mrs. Davis, the vegetable vendor, tugged me aside. Her voice was low, hesitant. "Linda, I hate to gossip, but I've seen your daughter-in-law at the corner cafe with a man. They're close, laughing, touching, like a couple." I forced a smile, thanked her, and walked away. But her words cemented the suspicions I'd been fighting. Jessica was no longer the woman I'd welcomed as a daughter. She had become a stranger, her intentions veiled in a way I wasn't ready to confront. The worst came one sleepless night when Michael's pain flared. From outside his room, I heard his soft groans, his voice fragile as he called, "Jessica, could you help me? My leg, it's killing me." I waited, hoping for a flicker of the tenderness she once showed. Instead, her voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'm not your nurse, Michael. If you need care, hire someone." I stood frozen, my hand gripping the doorknob, a sharp pain stabbing my chest. Michael went quiet, but I knew her words had shattered something deep within him. The house, once alive with laughter and warmth, now drowned in a heavy, suffocating silence. Every night I sat on the porch, the crickets hum my only company. My heart ached as I recalled Michael before his illness, when he'd wrap Jessica in his arms and say, "Mom, she's the one I'll walk with forever." I had believed in her, in their love. But now, the warmth in Jessica's eyes had turned cold, replaced by calculation and disdain. Seeing Michael struggle with his crutches, his gaze hollow, I felt I'd failed. Not just as a mother, but as someone who had once believed in love and trust. One overcast afternoon, as I set a pitcher of water on the table, the door swung open, accompanied by the familiar click of Jessica's heels. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood Jennifer Rivers, a former colleague from my days in the courtroom. now a stranger with a chilling, detached demeanor. Dressed in a sharp black suit, briefcase in hand, Jennifer carried herself with an authority that seemed to demand control of the room. I recognized her instantly, and the memories of our shared dreams of justice stung as she avoided my gaze, treating me like a nobody. Jessica, in a striking blue dress, sat down without so much as glancing at me or Michael. The air in the kitchen grew thick, like a storm was brewing. She slid a stack of papers across the table toward Michael, her voice devoid of warmth. "Sign here. We're getting divorced. By law, this house gets split in half." The words hit like a blow to the chest. Michael's already pale face drained of color, his trembling hands clutching the table as if it were his last anchor. I set down the glass of water, struggling to keep my voice steady despite the fury raging inside. "On what grounds is this house communal property?" Jessica raised her chin, her expression brazen. "We're married. Everything acquired during the marriage gets divided. Don't you know the law?" Her words were a slap, not just to me, but to the years Michael had spent building this house with his own hands. I took a deep breath, forcing my anger down, and responded firmly, "You're mistaken, Jessica. This house belongs to Michael alone. It was bought in his name before you were married. Legally, you have no claim to it." The room fell deathly silent. Michael lifted his head, a faint spark of hope flickering in his tired eyes. But Jennifer, seated beside Jessica, leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Mrs. Villasor, under U.S. marriage law, separate property can become marital property after years of cohabitation. You should watch your words." I met her gaze, the woman who once called me Linda with respect, now treating me as an adversary. "Jennifer," I said, my voice steady, "I know the law better than anyone here." The silence that followed was absolute. Michael looked at me, a glimmer of pride breaking through his pain, a look I hadn't seen since his hospital days. Jessica, undeterred, leapt to her feet, her voice shrill. "I don't care who you were. I just want out of this burden. He's an invalid, and I have a life to live." Her words crashed over Michael like a tidal wave. He sat motionless, shoulders trembling, his voice barely a whisper. "Jessica, do you really mean that?" She looked away, her silence more cruel than any response. My heart felt as if it were being torn apart. Michael, my son, the pride of my life, reduced to a burden by the woman he loved. I wanted to lunge at her, to scream that she didn't deserve him, but I stayed rooted, my hands gripping the chair, fighting to hold myself together. Jennifer stood, guiding Jessica out of the house, leaving the divorce papers on the table like an open wound. The door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. I began clearing the dishes, desperate to keep my hands busy, to avoid the pain crushing my chest. But my trembling hands betrayed me, and a porcelain bowl slipped, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed, mournful, like the breaking of my heart. Michael sat still, his empty gaze fixed on the papers. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "What did I do to make her change?" I sat beside him, resting my hand on his shoulder. "You did nothing wrong," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "She's the one who's wrong, not you." But deep down, I knew the truth was far more painful, a wound that would take more than words to heal. The house Michael built with his own hands, every nail driven by his sweat and dreams, stood as a testament to his promise, a home where no one could ever tear us apart. But Jessica, his wife, had other plans. She didn't just want to leave him, she wanted to strip away everything we had. That night, I sat on the porch, the hum of insects filling the darkness. A cold wind swept through, but it couldn't match the chill in my heart. The real storm was brewing, and it wasn't the weather. The divorce papers landed on the kitchen table like a guillotine. The air in the house turned thick, heavy enough to crush my chest. Every corner, from the wooden table where laughter once echoed to the hallway where Michael S.'s steady steps once rang, now held only silence. I watched my son, Michael, at dinner, his movements slow, deliberate, as he took small bites. His thin frame cast a long shadow as he leaned on his crutches, retreating to his room without a word. I wanted to chase after him, wrap him in my arms, and promise everything would be all right. But those words felt hollow, like whispering into a void. They couldn't ease the pain of betrayal from the woman he loved. Sleep eluded me that night. Moonlight slipped through the window, tracing faint lines across the ceiling. I thought of Michael, of the years we'd fought side by side, of my vow to shield him from harm. Yet here we were, his heart breaking at the hands of his wife. Helplessness gnawed at me as if every sacrifice I'd made had crumbled to dust. Thirst pulled me from bed. I slipped on a light jacket and padded toward the kitchen. As I passed Jessica and Sarah's room, Sarah, my 8-year-old granddaughter, my heart's joy, I froze. A murmur leaked through the wooden door, sharp and cold. "Sarah, listen carefully." Jessica's voice sliced through the quiet. "Tomorrow in court, if the judge asks, you say your daddy can't take care of you anymore. Say you don't want to live with a sick person. Understand?" My grip tightened on the glass in my hand, water trembling inside. Sarah's voice, small and quivering, answered, "But Mom, I don't want to lie. I love Daddy." Her words broke, clinging to the love in her innocent heart. Jessica's tone hardened. "If you don't do this, we'll lose everything. Do you want to live in misery with your poor grandmother and your crippled father?" The glass nearly slipped from my hand. My chest tightened, rage and sorrow colliding. Jessica, whom I'd once loved like a daughter, was forcing Sarah to betray her father. I stepped back silently, retreating to my room before they could hear me. Sitting on the bed, I buried my face in my hands, tears streaming through my fingers. I saw Michael in my mind, hoisting Sarah onto his shoulders, her laughter ringing as she pointed to the stars. "Grandma, I want to be an astronaut," she'd said, eyes sparkling. Michael had hugged her tight. "You'll make it, honey. Daddy believes in you." Now Jessica wanted to twist that love into a weapon. I wouldn't let her. I couldn't let Sarah grow up learning lies and cruelty. The next morning I rose with the sun, preparing breakfast as if nothing had changed. Michael slept, his face hollow, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Watching him through the cracked door, my heart tore. But today wasn't just about him, it was about Sarah too. I called her to the backyard, where the orange tree's sweet scent filled the air. She shuffled out, her blue dress stained, eyes red from crying. I sat her on the wooden bench beside me. "Honey," I said softly, "I heard you and your mom last night. You're scared, aren't you?" Sarah's lips trembled, and she burst into tears, throwing her arms around me. "Grandma, I don't want to do it," she sobbed. "I don't want to leave Daddy. I don't want to lie." I held her close, her small frame shaking against me. My own tears fell, but my voice stayed steady. "You don't have to lie, Sarah. Grandma's here. The truth is our strength. Remember that." She looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "But Mom says if I don't, she won't let me see Daddy." I wiped her cheeks, my heart aching but resolute. "Your mom is wrong. No one can take you from your daddy or me. I promise we'll get through this, just like your daddy and I always have." Sarah nodded, squeezing my hand. In that moment, a fire kindled inside me. I was fighting for Michael, for Sarah, for a future free of deceit. But I knew anger alone wouldn't win this battle. Jessica's plan was calculated, her armor thick. Words wouldn't be enough. I needed proof, a truth sharp enough to cut through her lies. That's when I turned to Robert Medina, a private investigator from a past I'd thought buried. His office, tucked in a Chicago alley, reeked of old tobacco and secrets. Yellowed folders and grainy photos cluttered his desk, lit by a single dim lamp. When I stepped inside, Robert stood, cigarette in hand, eyes wide. "Linda," he rasped, voice thick with smoke. My God, it's been years. I thought you'd retired. I offered a tight smile, the weight of my old life as a courtroom warrior pressing against me. I'm back for my son and granddaughter, I said, sitting across from him. I laid out the story: Michael's accident, Jessica's betrayal, the divorce, and her coercion of Sarah. Robert listened, his gaze sharpening like a hunter's. I get it, he said, voice low. I'll dig into her, but Linda, brace yourself. The truth can be uglier than you expect. I nodded, my resolve unshaken. For Michael, for Sarah, I'd face whatever came. The fight for our family had just begun. 2. The investigation. I stood in the dimly lit living room, my hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. Sometimes the truth hurts more than suspicion, I had told Robert, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I'm ready, Robert. I need the truth, no matter how much it stings. Days later, Robert met me at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town, a place where the hum of the world felt distant. He sat in a shadowed corner, a cup of black coffee steaming before him, a thin manila folder on the table. Without a word, he slid it toward me. My fingers trembled as I opened it, and my breath caught. The photos inside were unmistakable. Jessica, radiant in a crimson dress, clinging to the arm of a broad-shouldered man in a tailored suit, stepping out of a gleaming hotel on the Gold Coast. Her smile was bright, her eyes alive, nothing like the cold, resentful mask she wore around Michael. I gripped the photos, ice flooding my chest. His name's William Harris, Robert said, his voice low and grim. A real estate tycoon with a reputation for charming women out of their assets, backed by an army of lawyers and well-placed friends who bury his tracks. I stared at a photo where Jessica wore a glittering bracelet I'd never seen. This isn't just an affair, Robert continued. He's footing her bills, fancy dinners, designer clothes. I think she's after Michael's house, Linda, with William pulling the strings. Rage and grief twisted inside me. While Michael battled the pain of his injuries, struggling to walk with his damaged legs, Jessica, his wife, his love, was scheming to steal the home he'd poured his life into. I thought of the nights he stared out the window, eyes hollow, and my throat tightened with fury at the betrayal. How deep is she in? I asked, my voice sharp with barely contained anger. Robert sighed, shaking his head. Deep, Linda. Hotel receipts, plane tickets, bank transfers from William's accounts to hers. This isn't love, it's a transaction. I paid him, my voice firm. Keep digging, Robert. I need every shred of evidence. He nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. You're still the same Linda, tough as nails, but be careful. William's not someone to cross lightly. I offered a tight, cold smile. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. It was about protecting my family. That night, I locked the photos in a drawer in my bedroom. I couldn't let Michael see them, couldn't let him face the raw truth of Jessica's betrayal. He'd already endured too much, the accident, her cruel words, the pitying glances. At dinner, Jessica swept in, dressed as flamboyantly as ever, and casually suggested, Mom, we should sell this house, move to a luxury apartment. This place is so stale, don't you think? I met her gaze with icy calm. This house is Michael's life's work, I said, my voice sharp as a blade. It's not yours to toss aside. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing, turning to serve food to Sarah. My heart ached as I saw Sarah's small eyes dart away, burdened with too much knowledge for a child. A new resolve surged in me, not just to shield Michael, but to protect Sarah's innocence from her mother's schemes. The morning of the first hearing, a light drizzle fell, the drops slanting like my unshed tears. I helped Michael from our old car, his steps heavy, his crutch digging into the ground. His face was pale, eyes sunken from sleepless nights, but he managed a weak smile. I'm okay, Mom, he said, his voice trembling. I squeezed his hand, pouring my strength into him, though my heart broke at what lay ahead. Across the courthouse lot, a sleek luxury car pulled up. Jessica stepped out in a shimmering emerald dress, her smile smug, as if she'd already won. Her parents and brother trailed her, laughing loudly, treating the day like a celebration. My stomach twisted. They didn't see Michael's sacrifices, the nights I'd spent guarding our family. To them, this was a game, and Michael was prey. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and tension. Michael sat at the plaintiff's bench, clutching his crutch, eyes fixed on the floor. I stood behind him, silent, waiting. Jessica took her place, legs crossed, her heels tapping rhythmically, each sound a taunt. She looked at Michael with cold indifference, as if he were a stranger. Jennifer Rivers, Jessica's lawyer, rose, her voice sharp and commanding. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Jessica Torres, has endured an untenable life with a disabled husband. Mr. Michael Villaseñor cannot work or fulfill his roles as husband and father. We seek a divorce and an equitable division of assets, including half the value of their shared home. Each word was a dagger to my heart. I gripped my old leather briefcase, fighting the urge to scream. Jessica nodded, her voice dripping with venom. He's a burden. I deserve better than playing nurse to someone useless. Michael tried to stand, his hands shaking on his crutches. I can still care for Sarah, he stammered, his voice breaking. I'm her father. His face flushed, sweat beading on his brow, tears welling in his eyes. Jessica's laugh cut through the room, cruel and sharp. Look at you, Michael. You can't even stand. Who do you think you're fooling? The room buzzed with murmurs, pitying eyes on my son. My heart shattered. Michael, my pride, humiliated, labeled worthless by the woman who'd vowed to love him. The scales seemed tipped in Jessica's favor, and I knew I had to act. I rose, my steps deliberate, and approached the defense table. The zipper of my briefcase sliced through the silence as I opened it. I pulled a chair beside Michael, feeling his stunned gaze. I set the folder on the table, my hands steady despite the fire in my chest. 3. The Declaration. I took a deep breath and stood, my voice clear and resolute, cutting through the courtroom's tension. From this moment forward, I, Linda Villasor, will serve as the legal representative for my son, Michael Villaseñor. The room fell silent, as if time itself had paused. Jennifer, my former friend and opposing counsel, froze, her eyes wide with shock. Jessica, the defendant, stared at me, her jaw slack, her face drained of color as if confronted by a specter. Murmurs rippled among the older attendees, whispers of, Linda Villaseñor, could it be? Spreading like wildfire. I held Judge Morales's steady gaze, his eyes locked on mine, unyielding yet curious. With a gentle tap of his gavel, Judge Morales spoke, his voice tinged with awe and uncertainty. Mrs. Linda Villaseñor, are you, by chance, the Queen of Law? The question ignited the room, murmurs swelling into a collective hum. My son Michael turned to me, his eyes glistening as if seeing me anew, not just as his mother, but as something more. The elders nodded, their whispers recounting tales of the woman who once made rival attorneys quake. I nodded firmly. Your Honor, I have never wavered in my belief in justice. Those words were for the judge, for Michael, for myself, and for the onlookers watching with a mix of curiosity and reverence. A dormant fire within me stirred, the embers of my past as a formidable attorney reigniting. Jessica flinched, her confident smirk erased. Jennifer lowered her head, sensing the weight of the opponent she now faced. 4. The hearing. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation at the next hearing, the air taut as a stretched wire. Reporters, neighbors, and curious onlookers packed the gallery, drawn by the rumor that the Queen of Law had returned, a story that had swept through Chicago like a storm. I entered, holding Michael's trembling hand, his tired eyes flickering with a spark of hope. I squeezed his hand reassuringly, silently promising to defend his rights. Jessica sat at the defendant's bench, her elegance dimmed, her usual confident smile faltering. Jennifer Rivers clutched a stack of documents, her knuckles white, as if they were her last defense. Jessica's family, her parents and brother, sat behind her, their earlier bravado replaced by tense, furtive glances. They sensed the shifting tide, though they couldn't yet grasp its force. Judge Morales entered, his solemn presence commanding silence. He nodded for me to proceed. I rose, opened my worn leather briefcase, and produced a meticulously organized packet of documents. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady and commanding, "I present the property deeds for the house on the outskirts of Chicago, purchased by and registered solely in the name of my son, Michael Villaseñor, 2 years prior to his marriage to Mrs. Jessica Torres." I laid the documents on the table, each one a brick in an unassailable wall of truth. The court clerk examined them, nodding to confirm their authenticity. Judge Morales reviewed them, a subtle nod betraying his approval. The room erupted in whispers, the spectators' murmurs swelling. Jessica's parents paled, her brother bowed his head, and Jessica clenched her fists, her lips pressed tight in barely contained fury. Jennifer stood, her voice unsteady but defiant. "Your Honor, while the house may be separate property, it served as the family residence during the marriage. State law allows this to be considered in property division." I cut her off, my tone sharp and unyielding. "Mrs. Rivers, the law is unequivocal. Cohabitation does not alter ownership of property acquired before marriage. This house is my son's untouchable asset." The room's tension spiked. Under the table, Michael gripped my hand, his warmth trembling with emotion. I met his gaze, seeing that spark of hope flare brighter, as if he dared to believe we could prevail. But I knew the property deeds were only the beginning. 5. The turning point. I pressed forward, producing a small USB drive. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm but edged with steel, "I present a recording from the night before the first hearing." I handed the drive to the clerk. As the audio played, the room fell into a stunned silence. Jessica's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "Sarah, listen carefully. Tomorrow in court, if the judge asks, you say your daddy can't take care of you anymore. You say you don't want to live with a sick person. Understand?" Sarah's small, trembling voice followed, choked with sobs. "But I don't want to lie, Mom. I love Daddy so much." Jessica's tone hardened, merciless. "If you don't do as I say, we'll lose everything. Do you want to live in misery with your poor grandmother and your invalid father?" The room froze, the air thick with shock and outrage. Jessica leaped to her feet, her eyes wild. "That's fabricated. She made it up to slander me." Her voice cracked, and Jennifer placed a restraining hand on her shoulder, urging her to sit. Judge Morales raised a hand, his voice firm. "Order in the court. I wish to hear from the direct witness. Call Sarah Villaseñor to the stand." Sarah entered, her steps hesitant, her eyes red from crying but resolute. My heart ached for her. She was only 8, yet forced to navigate a battle of truth and deception. Jessica leaned forward, her voice saccharine yet laced with pressure. "Sarah, tell everyone you want to be with me, right?" The room held its breath. Sarah raised her tear-streaked face, locking eyes with Judge Morales. In a clear, trembling voice, she declared, "I love my daddy. I'm not going to lie. I want to be with my daddy and my grandma." The courtroom erupted, murmurs, gasps, and scattered applause from strangers. Michael buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs of fragile joy, knowing his daughter's love remained steadfast. Jessica's face drained of color as she screamed, "She's being manipulated! That woman brainwashed her!" Her words fell flat, ignored by the room. I approached Sarah, wrapping her in a gentle embrace, her small frame trembling against me. I met Jessica's gaze, my voice icy. "The truth cannot be manipulated, Jessica. and the child chose the truth. 6. The confrontation. The courtroom buzzed with tension, the air thick with anticipation. Sarah, my granddaughter, clung to my side, her small hands gripping my clothes as if I were her anchor in a storm. Judge Morales's gavel struck the wooden block repeatedly, demanding order, but the room's energy had already shifted irreversibly. Jennifer, Jessica's lawyer, sat with her head bowed, unable to counter the tide turning against her client. Jessica's family sat frozen, their eyes downcast, heavy with shame. Compassionate faces filled the gallery, some nodding in quiet respect. Suddenly, Jessica leapt to her feet, her eyes wild, her voice a piercing blade cutting through the silence. "Don't believe her! She's nothing but a failed lawyer. She lost a case so spectacularly she had to abandon her career. Who trusts someone like that?" Her words detonated like a grenade, stirring the room into a frenzy. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching like a rising tide. I glanced at Michael, my son, his head lowered, knuckles white around his crutches, as if my past could unravel everything we'd fought for. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened, her wide eyes brimming with worry. I took a deep breath, my chest burning. Jessica's attack wasn't just an assault on my honor. It was a desperate attempt to shake Michael and Sarah's trust in me. But I wasn't afraid. I'd endured sharper barbs and learned to forge pain into strength. Rising, I approached the defense table, my gaze locked on Judge Morales. My voice was calm, each word honed like a blade. Yes, I left the law, but not because I was weak. Years ago, I lost a pivotal case. Not for lack of skill or evidence, but because my ex-husband and his wealthy mistress bribed the judge. My arguments were airtight, my documents flawless, but the verdict was a mockery of justice. My honor was buried under dirty money, and I chose to walk away to preserve my dignity. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on me, not with pity or curiosity, but with profound empathy. Michael raised his head, tears glistening in his eyes, as if seeing the full weight of my past for the first time. Sarah's grip tightened, her touch a silent vow of trust. My words weren't just defending my honor. They were a testament to my son and granddaughter that I'd never bowed to injustice. I pressed on, my voice steady. That judge was later investigated and imprisoned for bribery. From that day, I swore I'd never let justice be tarnished again. I'm here now not for glory, but for my son, my granddaughter, and the truth our family deserves. Slow nods rippled through the elders in the room, who remembered whispers of the Queen of Law from years past. Judge Morales leaned forward, his gavel tapping lightly, his eyes gleaming with unmistakable respect. "I can attest to Mrs. Villaseñor's words," he said, his voice deep and resolute. "As a young lawyer, I was defended by Linda in a similar case. No one I've known has valued truth and the law more fiercely." His words swept the room, igniting murmurs of admiration. Reporters wrote feverishly, some whispering, "The Queen of Law has returned." Jessica wavered, her face pale, her lips tight, her earlier bravado crumbling. Jennifer flipped through papers aimlessly, as if conceding defeat. Jessica's family sat motionless, unable to meet my gaze. I turned to Michael, tears streaking his face. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. I rested my hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently, a silent promise I wouldn't let him fall. Judge Morales stood, his voice clear and commanding. "The court will recess. The final verdict will be delivered at the next hearing." His gavel struck sharply, sealing the moment like a punctuation mark on the truth. As we left the courtroom, the crowd parted, some strangers murmuring, "She's so strong. Justice has spoken." An elderly woman clasped my hand, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Linda. You've restored our faith in truth." 7. The verdict. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was a sea of faces, every seat filled, the air electric with anticipation. Reporters, neighbors, and strangers from across Chicago packed the room, as if the city itself held its breath. I entered with Michael's hand in mine, his fingers trembling against my arm. Sarah walked beside us, her small hands clutching mine, her eyes reflecting both fear and hope. I smiled at her, masking the storm in my chest, where my heart pounded like a drumbeat of fate. Jessica sat at the defendant's table, her once elegant dress now a hollow facade, her face drained of its former arrogance. Jennifer, her lawyer, sat with clenched hands, her gaze fixed downward. Jessica's family, her parents and brother, avoided eye contact, their nervous glances betraying their dread. Judge Morales entered, his presence commanding silence. He settled into his chair, his sharp eyes sweeping the room. The only sounds were the rustle of papers and the collective held breath of the audience. Clearing his throat, Judge Morales spoke, his voice a hammer of destiny. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court delivers the following verdict. The divorce between Mrs. Jessica Torres and Mr. Michael Villaseñor is granted. The house on the outskirts of Chicago, acquired before the marriage, remains solely with Michael Villaseñor. Custody of the minor, Sara Villaseñor, is awarded to her father, Michael Villaseñor, and her grandmother, Mrs. Linda Villaseñor. Mrs. Jessica Torres will receive no financial benefits and may only visit her daughter under judicial supervision. The room erupted in whispers and muffled applause. Michael collapsed against me, sobbing, his frail frame shaking as if a lifelong burden had lifted. Sarah flung herself into our arms, her tears soaking my clothes. "Grandma, Dad, I'm staying with you," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief and joy. I held them tightly, my own tears falling, not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing our family was whole. Jessica shot to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "This isn't fair! I'll appeal! You can't do this!" Her voice cracked, shrill and desperate, but it faded into the room's indifference. No one listened. Jennifer placed a gentle hand on Jessica's shoulder and whispered, "It's over, Jessica. We've lost." Her voice trembled as she took a few unsteady steps, as if her strength had drained away. Her family rose in silence, heads bowed, and left the courtroom, avoiding the scornful gazes around them. I watched them depart, feeling no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. Sadness for Jessica, my former daughter-in-law, once part of our family, who chose a path of betrayal and ambition. Days later, whispers from neighbors reached me. William, the wealthy real estate tycoon who had backed Jessica, severed all ties with her the moment he learned she lost the case. He stopped funding her lavish lifestyle, no longer sending cars to pick her up or covering her extravagant bills. Jessica was left alone in a dilapidated rented apartment on the city's edge, shunned and pointed at by the community. One morning, Mrs. Davis, the market vendor, leaned in and murmured, "Linda, I saw her packing her bags. No one knows where she went, like she wanted to escape it all." I nodded silently, but in my heart, I hoped Jessica would find a new path, even though she would carry the weight of her actions. Meanwhile, Michael, Sarah, and I began rebuilding our lives in the home we cherished. I dedicated myself to supporting Michael through his rehabilitation therapies, watching him slowly regain his confidence. At first he was reserved, but whenever Sarah ran to him, wrapping her arms around him and shouting, "Daddy, you're my superhero," his eyes would light up with a spark of hope. I helped Sarah with her homework, and we spent afternoons drawing vibrant pictures together. Each evening, the kitchen filled with the warm aroma of home-cooked meals. Family dinners, once overshadowed by Jessica's presence, now brimmed with joy. Sarah shared tales from school, Michael teased her playfully, and I sat there, my heart warmed by the two people I loved most, as if the storm had never touched us. One sunny afternoon, I caught Sarah sneaking my old high heels from the closet. She slipped them on, wobbling as she struck a pose like a lawyer. "Grandma, when I grow up, I'm going to be as strong as you," she exclaimed, bursting into laughter. Michael, watching from the porch, gazed at her with eyes full of joy and renewal. I joined them, sitting beside my son and granddaughter, staring at the orange tree heavy with fruit in our garden. Softly I whispered, "Justice may rest, but it never fades. It waits for brave hearts to call it forth." Michael grasped my hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, I don't know what I'd have done without you. Thank you for everything." I smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "I only did what any mother would," I said, though deep down, I knew it was more. I had fought not just for Michael and Sarah, but for myself, for the vow I made in our darkest moments to never let justice be trampled. The church bells in the nearby Chicago Square rang out, their sound clear and serene, like a blessing over our family. I looked up at the blue sky, sunlight filtering through the tree branches. After the storm, we had found peace. This house, once a battleground, was now a true home, a place where Michael was rebuilding his strength, where Sarah was growing up surrounded by love, and where I, Linda Villasenor, had kept my promise to my son and granddaughter. As I sat with those I loved most, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Life can strip away many things: our health, our trust, even the bonds we thought unbreakable. But it can never take truth or love. They became my guiding light, giving me the strength to face betrayal and injustice. 8. Reflection. I share this story not to judge, but to inspire reflection. How many mothers suffer silently in their own homes? If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep the peace, or would you fight to reclaim your voice? I'd love to hear your thoughts, for every story can light the way for others. I believe courage, blessed by faith, leads to brighter days.